Hi, my name is Reid. I'm a psychotherapist in San Francisco, California. And today I'd like to talk about making your inner experience matter again after narcissistic abuse. So in narcissistic abuse, I think folks who survived it, particularly from childhood, kind of talk about it in ways that really reflect this sort of duality that was sort of there, in their family relative to the outside world, where the narcissistic parent often really curated a kind, full of goodwill, altruistic image to those outside the family. Are often seen as pillars of the community, or people who go out of their way to help others, would give them the shirt off their back. But behind those closed doors, when there's sort of not an audience in this manner to sort of buffer or reinforce the narcissistic parents, in this case, inflated sense of self-importance that they require to sort of stave off that sense of worthlessness they experience that I've mentioned. Again, when that's not available, or that's what often people call that narcissistic supply is not available, in the family because of how the narcissist views the other family members, then he or she may treat the family quite poorly, rife with degradation, contempt, undermining, and derision. And I think, the examples abound, but, in one case, there was a narcissistic mother who would be screaming at the child survivor, and in mid-tirade, if the phone rang during the days of a landline, this narcissistic mother would pick up the phone and instantly say something like, "Oh, hi, I'm so glad you called." And so they could cut off in an instant to continue curating and cultivating this image of being a kind, well-adjusted, welcoming person to those outside the family. But of course, that child at the time knew otherwise. And what is really difficult about the child in this situation is it's sort of a secret. There's often nobody to tell, because, as you can imagine, the preponderance of people outside the home are getting groomed to believe that the narcissistic parent is a good parent, a good person, always there for people, which sort of further imprisons or can imprison the child in this situation. But I want to talk about another feature of this duality that can both inform the child's experience, and the adaptation made to it can be something that might get addressed once recovery becomes possible. And that is that, in this arrangement where the child really treats the family like crap and sort of exalts everyone outside the family, when the child may come to the, I think, pretty rational conclusion that, what happens behind closed doors in the family is unfixable. There's no effective way to protest the way the narcissistic parent is treating one, or ask them to change their ways, because that's only going to make them go harder at the child or the victim, or feel threatening, so they then therefore have to be more punitive and devaluing towards that child. So in essence, again, it's unfixable. But when this, sort of transportation happens, where the narcissistic parent is in the company of the outside world, where they put on this sort of good face, a real sense of relief can happen for the child victim, because they know that so long as they're in the presence of these others, they are not going to get overtly attacked, slammed, all the things that are sort of just the worst experience of attack from the narcissistic parent. And this sort of conclusion, I'm just going to sort of put sort of the logic of this conclusion that a child survivor may come to is, if I win the favor of people outside the home, then maybe the good feelings that offers me can save me from the torment of my family. In essence, that if one can kind of live in the moments of interfacing with those outside the home, carry those moments around and kind of discount the importance of what's happening in the privacy of one's home, where one is getting abused chronically, treated at best maybe as though they don't matter in any genuine way, and at worst having to suffer these really scathing attacks. That is sort of adaptive. It gives one this sort of oasis in which to sort of prioritize and live in, that can buffer oneself from the sort of despair involved in the reality of their situation, behind the closed doors of their home, because of the abuse that the narcissistic parent is leveling towards them. And so one of the sort of results of this solution to this kind of unfixable situation for the child is that they may have to sort of really up the importance of what others think about one outside the home in order to feel like they stand a chance of having a good impression or making a good impression and being well received outside the home. So that may make objectives like, that are sort of culturally sanctioned here, of like being attractive, physically, in other ways too, being funny, smart, athletic. You could go on with the list. Whatever might be deemed as a quality that would be well received from others can really grow in importance, because in order to be delivered from the torment that's happening behind, again, the closed doors, one has to have the hope that they can achieve the acceptance and the approval from the outside that would be the balm that's really wished for, that would sort of like take away all the pain and torment happening in the home, and sort of privately, eventually within oneself. So, I've talked before about the wounded self versus the hopeful self, and in essence, it's sort of a solution to say, if I can sort of live out in the perceptions of others and take their appreciation for me as like a panacea, then I don't have to attend to the immense pain that the wounded self is feeling. And for more explanation, I think there's a video titled "With the Wounded Self" in the title that gives a bit more thorough explanation of the wounded self as a means of surviving narcissistic abuse. So as one sort of practices this psychological solution to the abuse they're having to endure, where again the solution is, let me live in the moments outside the home where there's this moment where they don't have to worry about the narcissistic parent attacking, because the narcissistic parent is also focused and prioritizing how that parent's being received from the outside. And it creates this sort of hope that if they can wholly live within the perceptions of the outside world, that everything will be and feel better. It typically doesn't really come to fruition that it feels better, but that hope that it will or it can, or feelings that suggest it might, are critical, I think, in surviving a situation that does not offer much real cause for hope at the time that the child's having to survive it. And so one of the things that can sort of result is the need to prioritize one's perceptions of what others think about oneself, one's decisions, one's status in the world over one's own feelings. And it stands, I think, good reason, because, back in the abusive context, paying attention to how one feels internally would sort of sink one into like a morass of just the despair, the humiliation, degradation, feelings of inferiority that the narcissistic abuser is sort of intending the victim to experience. So it's rationally good to sort of keep those states at bay while one needs to get through it. And so prioritizing the thoughts of others is a real important and effective way to do that. And then after the danger that the narcissistic parent and family poses has passed, it may still, coming right out of it, feel somewhat difficult to access one's own opinion and or even value it above the perceived opinions of others. And I want to offer this context today because sometimes someone who's survived this kind of treatment, who's had to effect this kind of solution, may worry that they're sort of superficial or don't have a genuine, authentic self. And I see time and again that's not the case. You can just sort of tell when someone, has a sense of self, a real sense of themselves. Again, it's sort of like the brute facts of who one is versus, it's really amazing in I think the human condition how one's inner experience of who one is can vary so greatly from the sort of brute facts of how one is. In the case of a narcissistic abuser, it's flipped, where in their mind they think they're great, but they are treating really, really badly the people around them. And I think for survivors, the opposite tends to be the case, where they may think of themselves as, say in this case, superficial or inauthentic, or caring too much about what others think as a sort of a character defect. But in effect, that's not how they seem in the world or even behave in the world. So the way they are in the world is, again, the brute facts of who they are suggest they're pretty grounded and solid in who they are. But internally, it's been dangerous to know that consciously because of the threat that would pose to the narcissistic abuser. So with this context, just want to offer a few thoughts about recovery, as I think it really involves recognizing the part that's been able to affect this solution and developing compassion, again, for what the threat was that this part had to develop to cope with. And two, the benefits incurred by the survivor by virtue of this part. It can offer one a sense of meaning, things to strive towards, even if they feel as if internally as though they're solely for gaining the sort of approval or something from others. And that has offered the hope that they could save themselves from the hell having to be endured at the hands of the narcissistic parent behind those closed doors. Another piece so critical, again, is gaining distance from the narcissistic parent, from people like the narcissistic parent, where this kind of solution is necessary. And often, this solution is not, unheard of in the culture. So, finding people who prioritize their own presence, being in the presence of others, as opposed to sort of chasing these, chasing sort of like external status solely as like a sole preoccupation, would also be another way of gaining distance. So again, it sort of goes back to finding safe people. And lastly, within the context of these safe people, safe relationships, practicing paying attention to oneself internally, almost to the exclusion of what one thinks these other people might be thinking, and seeing how that goes, expressing one's opinion without worry of offending them. And then it offers kind of what is, I think, genuine reciprocity that can only happen with a safe person. So in essence, recovery, I think, involves knowing that it's now safe to inhabit the private realm of oneself that used to be so tormenting, scary, and offering zero genuine connection in it when facing the narcissistic abuse, and getting to kind of relate to other people's genuine expression, from their private realm, as it were. So I think that metaphor of, in essence, in narcissistic abuse, having to kind of figure out a solution where it's only safe outside the closed doors of the home, to relating to people within one's home, relating to safe and selected people, and so you're sort of relating, I guess, from each other's homes, as it were. Hope that analogy didn't get too beaten to death there, but it seems apt to a degree. So thank you again for your continued support of this channel and to each other. I hope everyone's well, and look forward to posting next week, Sundays at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Take care.